Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back to the program. It is exactly 8:33 a.m. We're going to be talking with Hassen Lorgat, not about the Quran burning situations outside of the Egyptian and Turkish embassies in Denmark, but we're going to be talking about the struggle for liberation of sports in South Africa. And just to give you a bit of a background, Hassen Lorgat has worked in trade unions, civic associations, the anti-apartheid sports movement led by SACOS as well as NGOs for many years. Outside work, he campaigns on a number of causes and is involved in the World Social Forum platforms and the battle against unjust mining and activism. He is currently the manager of policy and advocacy for the Benchmarks Foundation, and he also writes in his personal capacity. Always a pleasure talking with Hassen Lorgat. This time around, as I've indicated, we're going to be talking about the struggle for the liberation of sports in South Africa. Assalamu alaikum. Welcome to the program.
Walaikum salam, Julie. I know we're not talking about the Quran burning, but if people think they can burn the books of other people, fascism is not far off. I mean, this is what happens. Those who burn books actually will kill people next, So, and I don't understand what is this need to offend people needlessly. It's not even it's just an act to show that you can offend others. You have the power to offend. Anyhow. Yeah.
Well, let's digress then a bit regarding the Quran burnings. I came across a very interesting video on TikTok. I'm not quite sure who the person was. It seemed like he was a Malaysian imam, and he was being questioned by a group of young people. So he might have been in a university setting. In fact, I just viewed it last night, and I thought it was absolutely awesome because the question raised was, how do we as Muslims respond to Quran burnings? And he kind of made the analogy to Western people who have this deep affection for dogs. And he says that if their dogs attack you and bite you, what are you going to do? Are you going to go down on all fours and bark back at the dog? What do you believe is going to be the response of the dog? Are you going to be ending up in a fight with the dog? I thought that was brilliant. So what he then said is, they'll burn 2 or 3 Qurans. Our response must not be the response of man attacking dog. To show our displeasure against their reverence, Western peoples, and that's their choice, their reverence to animals, particularly to dogs. In fact, and I digress even further here, when I was growing up as a child, I mean, most of us grew up in poverty. And I used to look at white people in the then apartheid South Africa, and I couldn't, in my childlike mind, understand how is it that they spend so much of money in the care of their animals, their pets, their dogs, and they treat Black people so harshly. I could never, ever get over that. It was beyond my understanding as a child. Until today, I still question that. In the area I live in, if somebody's dog goes missing, you can't imagine the pleas and the heartbreak and all of the messages that go out on social media trying to get their dog back. And yet, in the same vein, we hear of street people sleeping under bridges and sleeping in this bitterly cold weather. And they're complaining about these people that are under the bridges and in the parks and taking away our beautiful spaces.
Yeah, Julie, I think the point you're raising maybe is that it's not either or, because it's about living together. I mean, how we live together with nature, how we respect the water resources that we have. Because if there's a problem with mining, it's not just that it's mining, but it uses excessive amounts of water that diverts attention for plant, animal, and human life. So the idea is that when you give the clear discrepancy is there, that the care is for one living being and not the other. So animals, which really have not asked to be domesticated or to be there, are taken much more care than other people who are suffering in a society that is highly unequal. So for me, the question is not either or, is how do we live together, making sure that each of us have some dignity and enough to eat and all that. Talking about dogs, South Africa, we trained dogs to hate certain people. Under they inbred them with wolves, and the police used these Alsatians that were trained as police dogs. Dogs didn't ask to be that. They were in the wild. My final story on animals is that Joe Biden's dog bit 7 security people that worked for him. I don't know what's going to happen to the poor dog.
Well, I know we were off topic completely, but I'm enjoying this discussion. So let me elucidate further. The other issue is when you talk about human beings training their dogs, particularly white people training their dogs. Again, another memory from my childhood, and it still carries with me today, is that, and I often till today wonder about it. Why is it back in the day when the postman or a black person walked past the property of a white person, the dogs went crazy? I would walk past and the dogs wouldn't do anything. And I always, always, always wondered about that. And that practice, and that's still happening. What is the story there? I still can't get my mind around that.
I mean, a few years ago, of course, any of us growing up under apartheid had to experience that, and you start hearing how we swear in all the languages. That's thank God we have them. And Futsek wasn't far off. That so I mean, I think we all need some therapy from our racist past. And I can see in a dog therapy unit, Jacob Zuma, and one who worked in a pet shop before, he also spoke about animals. Julie there, Hassan, all of us having to deal having to deal with our past of how animals were weaponized against other human beings. But the animals, Julie, I think we must just step
They're
back.
innocent. They're innocent in all
They're
of this.
innocent. Yeah, they're innocent. But talking about weaponization, sports was a tool as well, and this is what we are
Just
going to talk about.
sorry, Hassan, can I just interrupt you here before we move on to the sport issue? Coming back to the story of that TikTok video that I
Yeah,
viewed,
the
and
Malay
this
professor.
Malaysian imam, the one
Yeah,
thing that he made, which stuck with me, and I think this is the message we need to get out there regarding the Quran burning incidents. He said that we shouldn't go out in our masses and protest because that's going to erupt into clashes which we can't afford, which we don't need. We can't have lives being lost in these altercations. What he's saying is if they burn 10 Qurans, we then go on and print 100,000 Qurans and
yeah,
flood the markets with those Qurans. And let's also, which I thought was a brilliant idea, what he said is let us translate Qurans in the European languages, in Danish, in German, in all of those languages, and let's start educating the Quran haters or those people that don't understand what the Quran is all about. And I also kind of asked the question, what do these Quran haters or these writers, these fascists, believe that the Quran contains? What are they so afraid about the Quran that they're burning the Quran? Or is it a statement they're making, their hate against Muslims? So if they hate us that fiercely and that deeply, what is it that they fear about us as Muslims?
yeah. I think that Julie, it's like anybody who knows your weak point. If I know Julie maybe doesn't like Alsatian, so I'll come by with an Alsatian. Or it's a provocation that is easy. They know if they burn a Quran, they know that Iran will shoot up first, and then Turkey would come, and everyone contesting to be leaders of the Muslim community. So it's a very easy tactic to kind of scratch people. And I think that your Malaysian professor is right in that the response should not be that people should die for this. But what I really think should happen is that what is the essence of the faith? What is it that combines with the others? Because Islam's confluence through Judaism and Christianity, the parallels are there. So anyone who really has to, their prophets are also our prophets in many ways. Anyone who really wants to hate Islam must be having a deep hatred for themselves and their own prophets. Nabi Musa is Prophet Moses, revered in some. Jesus, Nabi Isa. So clearly there's a sense of self-hate, and I would rather say to open up these conversations. And Muslims and Islam is the fastest growing religion. What you would end up finding is that people will abandon the path of hate to picking up the essence of the message of justice, the message of equality. Why is it that people who suffer inferiority status in India and elsewhere, the safest religion, one of them to go to is Islam, because it gives, at least in the theory, equality. Of course, the fact that some people practice continue to to have a caste mentality is an issue that we need to still fight. So I really think more than just printing the good book, what we need to do is to get the essence of the faith out there and point to people about the road that we can travel together, I guess.
Alhamdulillah. What we're going to do now is go for an ad break, inshallah. And when we get back, we're going to be talking about the struggle for the liberation of sports in South Africa. Hassen Lorgat is my guest, and I always enjoy talking to Hassen. He's such a deep thinker. And, after the interview, I continue reflecting on the conversation that I've had with Hassen. So please do stay with us.
We are not dogmatics.
Life of a child, orphan, one word to replace smiles with tears, confidence with anxiety, and a future with fear. Help Africa Muslims Agency to give these orphans a new word, hope. AMA's Orphan Hope program provides security for needy children in rural Africa, in Afghanistan, and in the Syrian and Palestinian refugee camps of Lebanon. For 15,000 Rand per year, you can change their life, give them hope, with Africa Muslims Agency, empowering, educating, inspiring.
Online schooling? Why not? Kurtuba Online Academy is the leading global online Islamic school from grade R to matric, offering South African caps and international syllabus. And it doesn't stop there. We also offer online madrasa for every grade. For more information, visit www.kurtubaonline.co.za. Kurtuba Online Academy, the leading global online Islamic school.
SANZAF's Meals Distribution Project aims to create food security for those in need. By supporting our program, you can help us in our mission to provide access to nutritious meals on a daily basis and help us extend our reach. Join SANZAF in the fight against hunger by contributing to our food security initiatives. To learn more, visit sanzaf.org.za or call 011 834 6046. SANZAF, changing lives through development and relief.
Kids these days are smart, and when you're competing for their attention against their smartphones, you need to make smart choices, like using Sunfoil triple refined pure sunflower oil in every meal you make. It's naturally cholesterol-free and approved by the Heart and Stroke Foundation as part of a balanced eating plan. So whether you're cooking, frying, or baking, you get the great tasting results that'll get their attention faster than the latest app. And if that doesn't work, change the Wi-Fi password. Sunfoil. Now we're cooking.
At Sentio, our Invest for Good philosophy is based on a genuine desire to use our investment skills for the benefit of broader society by investing responsibly, giving charitably, and developing talent that will transform the investment industry. Visit www.sentio-capital.com for more information about our Sharia investment products and start saving with us today. Sentio Capital. Invest for good. Sentio Capital Management is an authorized financial services provider.
Rejuvenating media day by day. This is Salam Media.
Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Welcome back. It is exactly 8:47 a.m. My guest is Hassen Lorgat. And of course, that was a very interesting discussion earlier on. We were meant to be talking about the liberation of sports in South Africa, but I couldn't resist picking his mind on all the issues around Quran burning, whites, dogs, apartheid, and all of that. I could sit here for hours talking to the man. But let's move on and look at the struggle for the liberation of sports in South Africa in 29 years on. I'm kind of asking the question, do we still need to have this conversation? Have we equalized as far as sporting fields are concerned, or are there other factors at play now that needs to be considered as far as the different codes of sport? Hassen Lorgat, welcome back, and your thoughts on my opening question.
Yeah, Julia, I think it is sad that today something that is enjoyable as sport, art and culture, because clearly human beings are not just, we working people are not just meant to be slogging, and it's the demand of the trade union movement that they historically they wanted 8 hours of work, of course clearly less, 8 hours to rest and 8 hours to do what we want. But it partly also served the kind of need of the bosses that workers, if you keep on enslaving them, getting them so exhausted, they can't be productive for you. So increasingly, the struggle for leisure time was integral to what we wanted. We wanted more time for ourselves. And of course, this idea that working people, ordinary people could have a rest, could read a book, sit on the side, was an affront for wealthy people. They thought that was the preserve only for them. They could command us to kind of do things that they want us to do, and it's always at the service of them. So there are a number of people who actually go against sport, a number of theorists, from Chomsky to others, even within the Secos movement, were quite anti-sport for what they think sport does, or professionalized, moneyed sport, which is correct. Because what they aim is there to deflect you, to get you away from discussing issues that are important, like what we've just discussed. Because Chomsky has this one article where he talks about how when he's driving somewhere, and we all have this experience where people can analyze a game, ordinary people, to such an extent, the coach was wrong, the tactics were wrong. They cannot discuss the same issue about the other power structures that exploit them. They can't say
Absolutely.
the World Trade Organization is here, and you could see what this guy did was wrong. No, no, no. They would. So in a way, Secos, I think, in this country, we turned it around. Sports became a terrain for political struggle, where we used, in a very small way initially, Principal Ratan Sami, other school principal, Reggie Feldman, and others. We know them in our area. Ratan Sami down the road from Nirvana School, the late Ratan Sami. They were in the Secos movement, and they formed, before Secos was SASA, right? The South African Sports Association, Dennis Brutus, all those comrades were involved, a number of women. But what they ended up doing was they said, no, listen, we have talented kids in our school, in our community. They deserve the right. In fact, they say they passed a resolution to also play at the highest level as human beings, because there's some kids who are just excelling, and some, like my old daughter, doesn't want to beat other people, so she would kind of hold herself back. And these are different ways. These are different ways of how you play this. In contrast to me, where I used to run for the school, I was involved, as I say in the article, I was a child of Secos. I remember going down with these principals in the back of the bus, and them in a cold winter going to sports there, and hearing them talk as you walk in between. And one of the lines that impressed me, because we're not political to the extent at school, where they said there was only one race, the human race, partly because there was a superiority of races that people were talking about. So Secos this weekend will meet to reflect its legacy. It's a 50 years of Secos. It's a retrospective colloquium. And the history workshop at WITS, with Secos activists and intellectuals, will be sitting down to look at the contribution of Secos. So when I penned this article, was to look at all these kind of arguments, that what is the role of sport? How was it in our society? How did Secos initially isolate, using sport, isolate apartheid from the international community? Because what you end up finding, that only the whites were playing. It reinforces this idea that whites were superior. They were the best swimmers. They were sitting on Chevrolet cars, advertising with cigarettes. We were just, we were not there, So what they did was they started very slowly. Transvaal Indian Congress, Indian Congress people, various. The movement was there for every activist, but there were certain group of activists there, as I mentioned, Reggie and others, who later on in 1973 formed the South African Council on Sport. And as growing up in Lens and elsewhere, and I think you as a teacher, you must have heard of the Bluebells people. Bluebells played in the Federation Football League, fought for football playing fields in Natalspruit, and worked with some progressive liberals to get a sporting field. And what they celebrated 2 weeks ago or so was the Lenasia Stadium being their home ground, because the municipality had such tight control that non-sports between amongst people, the racists as they call them, was illegal. And SECOS basically coined the phrase, there can be no normal sport in an abnormal society. Now the
Absolutely.
phrase is easy, but it means a lot of things that we're against this, and all of us, like we discover how we interpret this. But Sekos then said, listen, the apartheid government's introducing a number of initiatives to break our power, because every time we say something, they put in some clever black there to say, oh, look here, we've got one black person, so they were trying to bring in multinational sports. The absurdity. If you tell your children or grandchildren, Julie, it will be a mockery. Indians playing coloreds playing whites. I mean, it is like a mockery to have that kind of sport. So Sekos basically used this without necessarily having a big power base, but they were brave individuals, in the early days, to say, we can't be as brave as people outside, but we can expose this. This is now SASA. When SECOS was formed in 73, the workers won strike. 3 years later, of course, it was the student unrest. There was a greater growing of struggles. But the history was such where the white sports people were already being besieged. They were now so bunged to go and play overseas, because when they tried to organize a rugby or cricket match there, you have young activists running on the pitch, stopping it. Don't play with apartheid. Don't scrum with a racist bum is one of the slogans that they had on posters, So these guys were finding it tough. But the people outside were not afraid, because they were living in relatively free societies. They could protest.
So, Hassan,
Yeah.
what about those rebel tours that came to the country? Did that not break our spirit to a certain degree? And obviously we protested, etc., but we weren't comfortable with those rebel tours, were we?
We were not, but Jules, Julie, in our time, we could not. There was a time we were so frightened to go out and do what Peter Hain and others were doing outside, grabbing a bobby and getting beat up and all that. The protests outside were very militant in support of our struggle. In New Zealand, halt all racist tours. The people were really using smoke bombs, everything else, creative tactics. Here back home, people just had to hold the line. And SECOS then introduced resolutions to say we don't play with the white guys, we don't play with racist sport. And then how this resolution was interpreted sometimes targeted a lot more individuals who were promising, some more opportunistic, but some of them just wanted to play their game and they didn't know how to excel in our fields. But what we often forget is those who did organize these racist tours were the South African breweries. They brought in the cricket teams, 7 odd tours. They brought in rugby teams, even All Blacks that we love so much, the All Blacks. They brought in the Windies. They brought in, you name them, Graham Gooch, and all those people were here looking for money. They were really mercenaries. But we do not talk about South African breweries or the CEO and those people and the legacies of their role in breaking the sport. What we look at, you look at Hussein Ayub, who later on became a coach in the white side, but he was our child. He was our friend, our teacher, my Afrikaans teacher, right? And so we talk about individuals like that to the in the same weight as those who had the power and means to collaborate with the Nationalist Party to isolate us. So for me, the story is one to say, let us reflect on that. But we also had lovely times, Julie. I mean, from where I'm sitting here in Extension 11, 400 meters away, there's a recreation center, which they are not used as much as we used to use them. I played table tennis. I was known as a runner at school. I played football. But we played all SECO sport. You go down there, none of the kids are playing. Now around football, people are reorganizing now, forming academies and that. There's some people. These are all people within the spirit of Secos, Atlantis and others having a swimming club, you know. But at the end of the day, the mass participatory sport that Secos by default or design championed is no longer here. You know, all we
Okay.
wanted, yeah.
Hassan, I'm going to have to interrupt you. We've got about 2 minutes to wrap up time. Very quickly, touch on stolen at the fishing line. You've covered most of what I was going to discuss with you in the article, and unity talks or hostile takeovers. Very quickly, can we wrap up on those two statements?
Yeah, I looked at the websites of a lot of these current national sporting codes, and I see very few of them cover our history. Julie, they don't cover this history of struggle. You know, the Glen Eagles agreement. They don't cover table tennis tries. You know, Dr. Vauda on his sick bed was worried about how the negotiations were going. So what the ANC did, they were worried that they didn't have control over the sports movement. So they created the National Sports Council, which in many ways were weak in the negotiations with these white sporting establishment. And as a result, what happened, what many of these white sporting authorities did was they became the leaders of the new South African sports bodies, because what they were based on was on merit and professionalism. We still don't have them. If you go to the township, we don't have the facilities that we talk about. Fewer and fewer people are playing sport. So I call this memoriacide. They killed our memory of struggle. At least if they recognize this, they'll realize the long road we still have to travel to make the playing fields equal.
Okay, this discussion needs a part 2, and we're definitely going to look at that possibly next week or the week after. Also, the issue of the monetization of sport, and it seems young minds are only interested in the money rather than the game, and a whole host more. But
And
let's
health.
leave that for part
And health.
2.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Thank
Wonderful
you.
talking with you. As always, go well. Keep us in your du'as. Inshallah. Assalamu alaikum to you.
Walaikum salam, and thank you for having me.
It is exactly 9 o'clock, and undoubtedly our news correspondent, and that, of course, is you, Zai Jadwit, standing by with the bulletin of the morning.